recording and share my screen. So everyone can see my screen? It's still loading, but
Loading.
See a mouse cursor. There we go.
There we go.
Nice full screen.
cool. Thanks guys for joining us in our June Digital Twin Hub meet. There seems to be a bit of a confusion with the time, but we got there finally. So my apologies to the speakers who came, had to stay an extra half an hour. And just a bit of housekeeping. So I'll let people in as well. The cameras are optional, so feel free to have them on and off. Please mute yourself when you are talking, and we can use the chat box for questions. There will be a Q&A at the end where you can ask questions just by raising your hand or using the chat box, but feel free to use it throughout the discussion as well. And if I can have everyone to sort of rename themselves on Zoom with their full name dash the company, that would be great as well, just for everyone to get to know others as well.
You just dropped out there for a second. You said if I could have everyone, and then I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, okay, so I just said everyone to rename themselves with their full name and then their company. So I think yours is okay, already okay. Just so we know where everyone's from. Am I coming through all right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
it came through that time. Thank you.
No worries. So this is our 6th session of the year, and it's on data management and digital twins. There'll be 4 more of Digital Twin Hub meets. You can have a look at the dates and the topics on our website, or just email us as well if there's any confusions or any questions. In terms of some of the other plans that are coming up later in the year regarding digital twins, we have the New Zealand Digital Twin Summit, which is going to be next week, 7th of July in Wellington. So if you need any information around ticketing or sponsorship or anything or participation, feel free to email me. And we also have a big event, which is the Smart Cities Week / Digital Twin Week, which will be in Melbourne later on this year in October. And again, if there's any sort of questions, feel free to email me or Jeanette, and we can give you a hand there. I would also like to acknowledge our cohorts of digital twins who are active in the Digital Twin Challenge. And just a quick update on the challenge as well. We're on track to socialize sort of final drafts of the project.
This meeting is being recorded.
Seems to have dropped out.
Yeah, you're back again.
Cool. So when did I drop out? Was it here?
We haven't seen any of the PowerPoint.
Oh, you haven't seen any of this at all?
It was just the start, just the.
Right. Okay. So yeah, just an update on the Digital Twin Challenge as well. As I was mentioning, we're on track to finalize the to socialize the final drafts of the projects in August through our international exchanges, and the cohort participants will be delivering masterclasses in an event that we're collaborating on with as well in November. And they'll of course be participating and speaking in our Digital Twin Week as well, and there'll be some level of engagement from them in the New Zealand Digital Twin Summit as well. As mentioned, the topic today is going to be data management and digital twins. And our speakers are Jack Barton from GRID, University of New South Wales, and Robert Stevenson from City of Hobart as well. So without me dropping off further anymore, I'll just hand it over to you, Jack. I'll stop sharing here.
Cheers, thanks, Owen. Now I'll just go to share my screen.
Yeah.
Share. Use Teams, so just having to go ahead with this. Okay, so there we've got a good full screen ready to go.
Yep.
Great. Okay, thanks everyone for giving me the opportunity to present to such a good close cohort. My name is Jack Barton. I manage the Grid Lab at University of New South Wales, where we do geospatial research, innovation and development. Anything to do with 3D and urban applications. So the digital twin realm has been a big one for us to be focusing in on, and we're doing quite a bit of work in that aspect, and also with the excellent digital twin challenge with the Smart Cities Council Australia New Zealand. So today I'll be presenting a bit of the an overview of a very big rabbit burrow of data management and digital twins. I think one of the key things I'm trying to convey in the PowerPoint is just how to take a more simple approach to what can be very complex issues, and just have some very sort of first principle rules of thumb that we might glean from the discussions that we've been having with the Smart Cities Council. Okay, so generally we can have two different types of digital twin. This is from the SCC notes that we've had from previous sessions. We can have a static digital model. Now that's good. You can hardwire them together. You can use them as you might be using in for planning and precinct design, things like that. Often used internally with access privileges to different collaborators, different teams. Then we can move towards a more dynamic model where you've got the live data flows, and it's something that can be, a real-time document to see what's happening as it is. So you can use that for very immediate management needs, and also then to look at those feeds and then start to do prediction and different types of analysis on top of that. These are both particularly in automotive industries and mining and looking at machines and things. These type of digital twins are quite well established actually. And so the challenge is being able to take these concepts and apply them to a broader urban scale. So in terms of the urban development process, data informs how our infrastructure is built, managed, and eventually decommissioned. So you've got the whole life cycle there. So real-time data can inform how our infrastructure is operated on a second-to-second basis. So it's like bricks and mortar. It becomes a critical component of the infrastructure. You need a good database, a base of data that can then support good decision-making for better long-term management of the infrastructure. In a way, data is infrastructure. And like any infrastructure, it needs maintenance cycles. It needs to be kept, up to date and using best practice management techniques. I'll talk a bit more about security a bit later. It's something that needs to be shared. If typically in urban development contexts, a lot of the data has remained behind closed doors for a number of reasons, maybe regarding data agreements or the absence of data agreements, and possibly also just for data quality issues, maybe fear of litigation, being exposing weaknesses and things like that. But there's much better ways of being able to guarantee a much better quality of data that can then be better organized, optimized, put into interoperable formats, and then shared freely. And that's really, I think, the key for a digital twin, is to be able to have a good open sharing of data, but also allow for the capacity to share closed data and secure data confidently. So sorry about the resolution, but this is a little image I ripped from the previous Smart Cities documentation, where you can see we've got a whole lot of different stakeholders involved here, lots of different technologies, and at that asset capture, planning, early design phase and construction, there's all this data that's part of the life cycle of a project. If then we can embed that data into some kind of digital twin or an analog of the actual real world environment, then we can continue that through the life cycle of the asset. So a data-driven digital model could integrate and prioritize maintenance needs, for instance, of transport networks. We could overlay planned infrastructure on existing to show interdependencies for optimization. We can identify inefficiencies and do this at a much more timely and way that's approaching a real-time analysis. An important thing is that there are multiple stakeholder groups here. If you look at each of the different disciplines involved along the way, the different industries, the different members of the general public, one issue is that there's potentially multiple solutions. Everyone makes their own digital twin. Do they talk to each other? We don't know. So a way of best preparing for that is through the use and deployment of standards. So a lot of resources exist in the BIM world, from the CAD world, in the geospatial and GIS world. And although CAD and GIS might seem like similar animals, they work at different scales and have very different skill sets involved on the experts that use them. Also, and a very exciting emergence has been the sensor web and a formalized Internet of Things, where you've got lots of different commercial providers that are opting in to have standardized ways of interfacing with other units. And so we're starting to see that in a very exciting way. However, I think there's a long way that we can go to explore the potential of these technologies. And then, from the economic, environmental, bio, landscape side, transport, mobility, walkability, overlaying that with health metrics, we can get all these metrics, we can get all this data from all these different areas that have, of course, typically been kept in strong silos. And different asset classes have different standards. It's the old N+1. Perhaps we might need another standard to bring these standards together. Who knows? Let's have a look at it. There's some very good international documentation out there. There's a lot in this slide, so please just Google some of these terms or follow up on your own of your own interest. The Gemini principles are excellent. Gemini being the twin. This is coming from UK Centre for Built Britain, and then also our own ANSLIC standards are integrating tightly with the Gemini principles. So that's a very good main document to be looking at, or a set of principles for digital twin development. Then, of course, we've also got the Open Geospatial Consortium, International Standards Authority, that are bringing on and becoming interested in the idea of digital twin, because standards are so important for having a good base of data. And also, importantly, the web-based protocols, W3C, IEEE. Now, I put this in just because I can't resist this diagram, and I think it's a really good way of describing things. Especially, don't be scared if you're a non-technical person, because up here you've got the more human things, user interface and applications, trust, proof, unifying logic. This is what the technology or the data, the good base of data, needs to support. So we can start to see all these things we've got, all these individual digital objects. We can start to add layers of semantic meaning. We can start to say, what do these things mean? We can start to say, what's the relationship between these things? So taxonomy is a big list of everything. Then we get up to the level of ontology, where we start to say, how do all those things interact to each other, interrelate to each other? And so that's, I think, a very important concept for digital twin. And I can't actually see a digital twin being anything other than this, just personally. It has to be something that enables good semantic understanding. That's something that's human readable as it is machine readable, and something that you can, where it stands up to interrogation, and it's an evidence-based, a data-based approach that you can trust between multiple stakeholders. And that's really analogous to what the internet has been, HTML, and different ways of building web pages and having them interoperate. We do trust our banking online. So I think those technologies are especially applicable to digital twin understanding. Down the bottom, I said, could we use another ontology? Well, ontologies are great for when you've got very complex things that are changing a lot with multiple stakeholders. So potentially there is a lot of something there if you're interested in ontology. Anyway, some pain points that have come up from discussions within the smart city clusters has been on governance. You know, how do we look after this data between many stakeholders, leveraging existing data? There's a lot of work in there, cleaning, storing, valuing the data, doing analysis, actually using the data and separating the noise from the signal from the noise, you know, and what might be signal to one person's noise to another. So how can you reveal meaning from these clouds of data that we're generating? Could digital twin be a good solution for that? Keeping data up to date, interfacing with other existing platforms and initiatives that people have invested a lot into. So some thoughts on those points, not necessarily one-to-one, but combining public data and private data, I think, is important. The same way, you know, in open data, closed data, free data, and paid data. We want open data to be as accessible as possible, but also I think digital twins, it is important to have access-based, privilege-based rights to be able to access subsets of data that aren't necessarily, it's not in the public interest to be made public. And there's certain things for security reasons or whatever, where you do want just a smaller group of stakeholders to be able to access. So I think access between the different types of data is a very important thing, and to make that very clear on the digital twin models. With maintenance, data decay is a very real thing. You know, as soon as you get the data, it starts decaying if it's a static data set. So we're seeing a very important move towards decentralized systems and federated architectures, where each data custodian is responsible for maintaining their own data up to date, or as up to date as possible due to their maintenance cycles or their update cycles. And then publishing that in an easily discoverable way. And that's where we get to programmatic connections. So I used to work with Auran, the Australian Urban Research Infrastructure Network. And at the time, the key platform was the Auran portal, where it was a very easy to use data discovery tool that had privilege-based access. They're actually retiring the portal in a few days at June 30, 2022, and they're moving towards an entirely API-based ecosystem. So it'll be very interesting to see progress in that way. But especially, I think the short answer for how do we share data for digital twins is certainly, it seems that the API-based ecosystems have become the de facto standard for the next few steps, at least. So here's a quick little overview. I won't go through all this, but this is some of the Smart City Council then, now, new and next ideas on how we can go with our data and data sharing. Of course, you see it's going from singular to more community-based and moving towards sharing, and especially having data sharing policies in place. You know, what is open, what is closed. Embedding data standards into the procurement of goods and services and data management, and then also especially the issue of monetization, commercialization of data assets, but also how do we share things on non-commercial or for the public good. Also, just down the bottom of the screen there, I've put in a cheeky plug for an event we've coming up, and it's also in the chat, where next week we're at UNSW Grid Lab. We've been working on a project in collaboration with Auran and Frontier SI, designing a digital twin for the Liverpool precinct in Sydney, and we'd like to invite you to join us if you can, to have a look at what we've done, and to maybe answer some questions in the survey that we'll be able to write up in an academic context. So if you're interested in that, please join us. But I hope I'm around 10 minutes. I'll leave it at that. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Jack. That was great. I realize there's a few questions in the chat, but we'll go through them when I stop the recording at the end after Robert's presentation. So Robert, if you're ready, you can share your screen.
Thank you. Hang on 1 second. I'm just going to.
No worries.
Okay, so I'm just share the screen there. If you're seeing that, no, you're not yet. Okay. Are you seeing that now?
Yes.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. So look, I'll apologise in advance because I was off all last week with COVID, so I'm suffering a little bit from the dreaded brain fog, and I'm also a little bit underprepared. But what I'll just quickly go through is the I guess the progress that we've made in Hobart towards developing a digital twin. Now this the subtitle there, a business case for digital infrastructure reform, refers to our desire that that the digital twin that we develop in Hobart should be, first of all, a local government run twin, and secondly, that it involves surrounding councils and starts to bring in more and more local government bodies as it progresses. We, I don't, the dirtiest word in local government is amalgamation, and understanding that people were uncomfortable with the idea of amalgamation, particularly when it was being driven by the capital city. At the same time, we were very keen that we were able to share information much more readily with the surrounding councils. And as part of the city deal, which is a federal, state and local government funded program down here, the Hobart City Deal, there was a working group called the Smart Cities Working Group that was one of the several working groups put together by this city deal. Unfortunately, it was the only working group in the city deal that didn't have any funding attached to it, and so our job was to come back to the federal government and talk about a smart cities project, a program for Greater Hobart, a project that would be suitable for city deal funding. And what we came back with was the idea of the Greater Hobart digital twin, which we have currently got funding sitting with the federal government for a funding request to the federal government. We had relatively good success getting that up to the ministerial level last year. Unfortunately, we've now had an election and we're going to have to probably go through that process again. But in any case, I was interested in Jack's image there of the technology stack. And I think that's been a really important part of our journey, is to try to determine how we, first of all, get people interested in digital twin, because the most common answer from politicians is a digital what? What are you talking about? And so being able to unlock funding, it's important that you can excite politicians who have access to that funding, but at the same time, building a digital twin from the top down doesn't make a lot of sense for all of the reasons that Jack talked about. All of your sort of the data governance needs to come first. And so what we did was we decided to do a proof of concept for the city of Hobart, and that's a still image for it that you can see there. And I'll just move through this presentation pretty quickly now. So we wanted to provide something. Oh, back to that. We wanted to provide something to. So we wanted to provide something that showed what a digital twin could be, but at the same time, we knew we didn't have the data governance and the structures and everything underneath it. So we built this proof of concept, and that's a a view of it that you can see there. And then why it stopped going through. But in any case, the drivers for us were certainly to be able to develop this federated system, the way Jack has just described it, where all of us are custodians of a huge amount of public data, so us and the surrounding councils. But even though we all have, to a certain extent, an open data policy, we're really aware that most people in the community have got no idea how to access that data, and in fact have got no hope of accessing that data. And it's really only open if you happen to be, you know, a database programmer or someone who knows how to start working with, you know, a portal into various public data sets, which is, and most people aren't. And at the same time, most people are now very comfortable with the idea that they can get hold of whatever data they want to in the world through mechanisms like Google. And particularly they're used to the idea that they can do that spatially and visually through things like Google Maps and Street View. And so what we were keen to do was to show that local government could make accessible the vast databases that it has at its fingertips in ways that were useful to the people in the community, and whether that's investors or businesses or students at the university or just ratepayers. We were keen to try to understand how we could build something that not only had this beautiful cinematic quality about it that people would be immediately attracted to, and also funders would be able to understand without needing to understand anything about data or sharing data or federating data. But then also that we could start to build up those governance layers and create something that gave access to more than just imagery of the city. So we've just reached a point where we're starting to integrate some of the data that we have available, and so this is just a still from the digital twin. And with the excuse me, in this case, we've integrated the underground reticulated stormwater and mains water systems, and this is actually across the river. So Hobart's over here, and this is across the river in Clarence. This is state government data. But we're able to overlay this data, and that's always been available, and it's been available through the list in Tasmania or through GIS systems. But to most people, it's not available. So most people don't have any way of accessing this. Whereas this is just a web, an open web view on this data, and if you click on it, you can get the metadata that surrounds that piece of infrastructure. As probably most people have discovered, the vocabulary around how we present data to the public or even to ourselves through a visual digital twin interface is still developing, and so we're very much seeing this as a proof of concept. So this is not federally funded. This that you're looking at now is all funded from within the city of Hobart, but it's been work that we've done in order to show that there are ways of not only showing the city, but also integrating some of the data about the city. And then a lot of the issues beyond data come you know, so this one in the middle, integrated digital reform. This is where this idea of digital amalgamation, where without needing to amalgamate politically, we're able to share data with our sort of sister councils in a way that's useful to them, useful to us, and useful to the people of Hobart. And then in new ways, sort of to unlock economic investment ideas. And some of those ideas include, for instance, this is a BIM model. So we've got, at the moment, only one BIM model sitting in our twin, which is the model of a hotel that went in, but the idea that you can view that model in situ and view what its shadows do and everything is really interesting to people. But then also for the developer, as we build up data sets like people counting the typical pedestrian and vehicle traffic past particular sites, that's really interesting data to a developer who wants to know whether this piece of property that they're looking at actually has foot traffic going past it, and if so, when, at what time of day. And that helps guide them as to what kind of investment will work better in those locations. And then one that we're quite interested in developing is Hobart is starting to develop quite well as a location for international film ventures. And the digital twin is a wonderful way of being able to sell the aspects of the city through integrating with the kinds of software that film producers use. And I'm not an expert on this at all, but there are currently a very small number of software platforms that people can put their locations into, and it's like a location scout software, and being able to open up into a 3D fly-through model, and particularly one that has things like shadow lines, so you can look at what the shadows are going to be at any time of the year, at any time of day, is really important data to those kinds of people to help them make a decision of whether or not Hobart is the place for them to bring their film production, which we're very much hoping to convince them it is. The kind of use cases that we are most interested in, sort of in the first instance at least, are these. So things like traffic modelling, urban canopy, parking studies, shadow analysis, public transport planning, asset inspection, visualizations of new developments, and tourism. But those are some of a large number of potential either efficiency creating or revenue generating use cases for the city. We're also incredibly interested in working with people who have data sets about the river. So the Derwent River is an incredibly important part of Hobart, and every LGA in Hobart has banks adjoins the Derwent River. And there's a lot of really interesting historical data that's trapped in various data sets. And so to me, there's a really important aspect of digital twins, that they can become the platform by which people can access data sets that they otherwise wouldn't know exist, or would have no idea of how to visualize them. And so it becomes, sort of a low-cost way of at least understanding what data is available. And there are 3D surface models of the bottom of the Derwent River, which we're really keen to incorporate into our digital twin, so that you can look at the river as a 3D object, not just the top surface of it. We're not quite there yet. Another really fascinating one for me is ground penetrating radar and being able to pick up what's underneath the streets, and that's really fascinating data for anyone who needs to dig a hole. For instance, us, every time we dig a hole, it costs us 3 times more than we thought it would, because there's something underground that we didn't know was there. And then a really interesting kind of project is because we've developed our own drone program within the city, and we don't rely on external near maps and those people to give us the base data layer. We've discovered that we can start to collect really interesting new types of data. So for instance, this is an image of Sandy Bay, one of the suburbs of Hobart, taken quite early in the evening on an extremely cold winter night. And the kind of data that you can start to glean from there is, if you look at these two houses, for instance, next door to each other, you can see from the chimneys of both these houses that they're both occupied at the moment, and that they're both using their heaters or wood fires, whatever they've got running. But one of them is dark purple, indicating that the roof is freezing cold, and the other one is a light orange, indicating that the roof is quite warm. And it's a really interesting way for property owners to get a sense of whether or not their house is radiating its heat that they're paying for straight out to the environment. And you can see very quickly that there are a number of houses that are either more modern or made of different materials or extremely well insulated, interspaced with these probably older houses that are essentially indistinguishable with the rest of the environment. The colder houses obviously are performing much better thermally. And then we've extended that also to daytime thermal mapping. And again, this is because of developing our own drone program, we're able to do really small bespoke drone missions. And so one that's really interesting is understanding why we have about 750 kilowatts of solar that the city owns. And occasionally we realize that some of these aren't performing as expected. And thermal mapping is a really interesting way of doing an analysis. And it doesn't involve sending someone up onto the roof, which is always great for us from safety perspective and also time perspective. So you can see that the solar panels are all of a similar temperature, except for these particular cells, which are the ones that aren't operating. Essentially what it means is that the energy that's hitting those cells from the sun, instead of being converted into electricity, that cell is not working, and so that it's just overheating. And so it gives a really quick snapshot of whether our assets are performing the way we would like them to perform. So here's our drone operator. I'll just show you two of these images. One is what we've got a group of drones. The two main ones are this one, the Matrice, you can see up the top there, which is fantastic for very high resolution, relatively slow image capture. And then also this one, which is a Wingtra, which is a fixed wing drone, which is still relatively high resolution, but extraordinarily much faster to collect data. So what takes us, a few weeks with the other drone, this one can pick up in the morning or in an hour or so. And so this is a really quick way for us to pick up large swathes of the city at relatively high accuracy and to develop up that model. Next phase is experimenting with doing LiDAR mapping as well, and we've got our first LiDAR unit arriving within the next few weeks, so we're excited about that. And then also the equivalent of Street View, which we looked at various commercial models of what we could do to pick up imagery from street level, because the drone obviously fails as soon as you need to look closely at the footpath or anything like that. And so we've developed, we couldn't afford any of the commercial models, but we have been able to essentially use the same system as photogrammetry. We've been testing this, and we're about to put our rig out for the first time to have LiDAR and digital SLR cameras sitting on the top of a vehicle and picking up our own Street View layer, and then doing the same kind of photogrammetry that we do with the rest of the digital twin. And then a few little things that come up sort of unexpectedly. We filmed this hotel, the Brunswick Hotel in Hobart, and then just a couple of days later, it burnt down, which was extraordinarily sad. And it was an arson attack, and we were able to do a 3D scan of it before and after. And this was particularly useful because the fire brigade on site didn't have a sense of A, what the totality of the building looked like, and B, whether it was safe to send people in and where they might send them in. So we were able to provide them within a couple of hours a 3D scan of the building, which was fantastically useful for their analysis of what happened, but also for the safety of their crews to understand what was structurally stable and what wasn't within the building. And then we have started to work really closely with our public art department we just commissioned what we think may be one of the first digital public artworks designed to live in a digital twin. That's not it, but that's just some of our public art that we capture in the digital twin. We capture in our photogrammetry models. And then just going back to that idea of kind of the majesty of the local environment. This is an image of up close of Kununyi, Mount Wellington, just up above Hobart. And there's a structure called the organ pipes, which is really something that most people would never ever get to see apart from far away. And we have a really lovely sort of high resolution imagery of that now. I was just going to quickly, are you seeing that now?
Yeah.
So have I got a little bit longer?
Couple minutes perhaps, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly just show you. This is so this is our own photogrammetry, our own drone capture, but then using the Bentley Open Cities platform to do the processing, and that's the system we've been using to date. What you're looking at there is a flat digital terrain model. So this is a 2D image of the city with the data draped with a two-dimensional image draped over it. I'm just going to turn on the 3D mesh, but for some reason, oh no, here it comes. I thought Zoom was playing havoc with it. So this is our 3D model of the city, which will slowly resolve into place. And one of the really interesting things for us is being able to include live data. And this is where I was saying also we just really haven't developed the vocabulary for that yet. But as an example, if I put in the car park occupancy, you can see some of our major car parks here that are owned by the city. And so if I go to Argyle Street Car Park, so this is live data, so live to the second, where it's got 103 spaces available, so 129 total, and it's 91% full. And so we're starting to be able to provide this live data layer. And then we also have just, and this is something that I'm really keen to use the digital twin for. This is, for instance, our information that we've built around the e-scooter trial that's happening in Hobart at the moment. And so you can see we've got this fantastic data about where people are riding, when they're riding, exactly which routes they take, which has been fantastic for us to understand how people use the city, where they want to go, how they use the city in ways that public transport won't allow them to use it. We haven't yet made that integration across the digital twin, but it's where we want to go to get this kind of live data layer and this kind of analysis of how people are using the city, which we would really love to be able to see brought into the digital twin. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert. That was great. I'm just going to share my screen and we can go to the Q&A section. Cool. I'll just stop the recording.